My colleague stole my project and took all the credit, so I made sure they got exposed in front of the CEO. I spent months working on a project that could change everything for our company. It was my brainchild, my hard work, and my ticket to a well-deserved promotion. Then my colleague Jake did the unthinkable. He stole my work and presented it as his own. He stood in front of the entire leadership team, smug as hell, taking credit for every idea, every strategy, every late night I had poured into that project. And I was supposed to just sit there and take it? Hell. Number. What Jake didn't know was that I had one last move to play. By the time I was done, he wasn't just embarrassed, he was finished. Here's how I exposed him in front of the entire company. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. This project was everything to me. It wasn't just another presentation or some random corporate task. It was an idea that could transform the way our company operated. For months, I poured my heart into it. Late nights, early mornings, working through lunch, this was my chance to prove myself. I put together a detailed strategy, compiled real-world case studies, and even ran test models to prove my idea would work. And just as I was finalizing my presentation for the executive board meeting, my colleague Jake walked up to my desk. "Hey, need any help with that?" he asked, his usual fake friendly tone in full effect. I should have known then. I should have seen the red flags. But I was too focused, too invested in my work to notice what he was really doing. So I just shrugged. "Nah, I got it, but thanks." Jake nodded, smiled like he actually cared, and walked away. I had no idea that a few days later, he'd be standing in front of the CEO, presenting my entire project as his own. The day of the executive board meeting, I walked into the office confident. I had my final slides ready, my talking points memorized, and I was ready to impress. That confidence lasted right up until I got a last-minute email notification. Subject: Agenda update for today's strategy meeting. I opened it, skimming the agenda, then my stomach dropped. There it was, my project. But next to it, Jake's name, not mine. At first I thought it was some kind of mistake. Maybe he was just introducing my work. Maybe this was some weird clerical mix-up. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I rushed to my manager's office trying to stay calm. "Hey, I just saw the meeting agenda. Why is Jake presenting my project?" My manager barely looked up from his computer. "Oh, Jake sent me the files a couple of days ago. He said you were both working on it, and he had more experience leading presentations. It made sense to let him take point." I felt like I'd just been punched in the gut. "Wait," I said slowly, my pulse pounding. "He told you we worked on it together?" My manager sighed, rubbing his temples like I was annoying him. "Look, I don't have time for this right now. The meeting starts in 10 minutes. Just let it go." Just let it go. Jake had stolen my entire project, handed it in behind my back, and was now about to take credit for months of my work, and no one cared. I was furious, but I didn't lose my temper. No, I did something better. I smiled, nodded, and walked out. Because if Jake wanted to present my project, he was about to get humiliated in front of the entire executive team. I walked into that meeting and took a seat near the back, keeping my expression neutral. Jake was standing near the front, setting up his slides, shaking hands with senior executives, acting like he belonged there. The CEO arrived, along with several high-level directors. This was a huge opportunity, and Jake knew it. If this went well, he could be looking at a promotion or, at the very least, recognition from the highest levels of leadership. I didn't say a word as he started his presentation. He clicked to the first slide, my slide, with only his name on it. He spoke confidently, reciting information I had spent months researching. He used my phrasing, my structure, my data models. He was delivering my work word for word, as if he had created it himself. I saw a few people in the room nodding along, impressed. But then, something interesting happened. One of the senior directors asked a question. Something very specific about one of the data points I had included. Jake hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. I knew the answer immediately. If he had actually worked on this project, he would have known too. Instead, he fumbled. Well, the data set is projected based on industry trends, and the director raised an eyebrow. Which specific trends? Can you walk us through the methodology? Jake's face went pale. He hadn't expected to be questioned on the details. He glanced at the screen, probably hoping the answer would magically appear in his slides. It didn't. I'd have to double-check the exact numbers, he said, forcing a chuckle. But the overall strategy remains the same. The room was quiet. I could see people exchanging looks, sensing something was off. That was my cue. I raised my hand. Actually, I said, my voice calm, I can clarify that. All heads turned to me, including Jake's, whose face was now a mix of shock and panic. I smiled. Since I'm the one who originally compiled the data, I can walk you through the methodology in detail. Jake froze, and just like that, the room shifted. People were now really looking at him, questioning what was going on. The senior director leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. I'd love to hear that, he said, turning away from Jake entirely. I stood up, walked to the front, and took over my own presentation. Jake? He could only sit there and watch as I took back everything he had tried to steal. I stepped up beside Jake, who was still frozen in place, and calmly clicked to the next slide, the one I had spent weeks perfecting. As I was saying, I continued, addressing the room, the data was compiled based on a multi-source approach. I pulled trends from industry-leading reports, conducted an internal performance analysis, and built predictive models using our company's own historical metrics. The projections here aren't just estimations, they're backed by hard numbers. I turned to Jake and gestured toward the laptop. Would you like to elaborate on that methodology? Jake looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Silence. The CEO tilted his head. Jake, can you explain how you arrived at these conclusions? Jake swallowed hard. Well, I mean, the overall trajectory was... He trailed off, clearly struggling to find something, anything, that would make him look like he still had control. The senior director who had asked the original question smirked. He wasn't buying it. That's interesting, he said, flipping through the printed agenda. Because based on what I'm hearing, it sounds like my name was the one who actually developed this strategy. The room shifted. Executives exchanged looks. Murmurs started. Jake knew he was caught. I decided to twist the knife. I also have the original documentation, I said, walking over to my seat and pulling out my notebook. These are my notes, including drafts, calculations, and references. If anyone would like to see how the research was actually compiled, I'd be happy to walk you through it. Jake looked like he was about to pass out. The CEO leaned forward. Jake, he said, his voice dangerously calm, was this your work? Jake hesitated, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. Well, we collaborated, so... No, I cut in, my tone sharp. We didn't. Silence. Jake knew he had lost. I turned back to the executives. I'd love to continue the presentation and go over the key implementation strategies, since, I actually built them. The CEO nodded, completely ignoring Jake now. Go ahead. And just like that, I took back everything that was mine. As I continued the presentation, the shift in the room was undeniable. The executives were now fully engaged, nodding along, asking thoughtful questions. Questions that I actually knew how to answer. Jake? He sat there, silent, sweating, shrinking into his chair. Every now and then, I'd glance at him, just to see how deep the panic had set in. He wasn't taking notes. He wasn't even pretending to be involved anymore. He was just staring at his laptop screen, probably praying for this meeting to end. But the best moment? That came at the very end. When I finished my last slide, the CEO folded his hands and said, "Thank you, my name." That was an impressive and well-prepared presentation. Then he turned to Jake. "Stay after the meeting. We need to talk." The entire room went quiet. I bit back a smile. That was the corporate version of, "You're screwed." Jake barely managed a nod. His face was pale, his hands clenched into fists. Everyone started packing up, and as I walked out, I made sure to glance back at him one last time. He wouldn't even look at me. The moment the door shut behind me, I took a deep breath. The best breath I'd taken in months. Because this wasn't just about proving myself. This was about taking back my worth and making sure that no one, not Jake, not anyone, would ever take credit for my work again. And Jake, his humiliation was just beginning. I didn't have to wait long to hear what happened next. An hour after the meeting ended, I got a message from a coworker. Coworker. Dude, Jake just walked out of the CEO's office looking like he saw a ghost. Me. What happened? Coworker. No idea, but he went straight to his desk, grabbed his stuff, and left. Didn't say a word to anyone. I sat back in my chair, a satisfied smile forming. That was fast. Later that afternoon, I got the full story. The executives hadn't just called Jake out for stealing my work. They had torn him apart. The CEO had zero tolerance for dishonesty, and after seeing him fumble under pressure, they realized he had no real value to the company. He was given two choices, either resign quietly or get fired. Jake, probably hoping to save face, chose to resign. But the damage to his reputation? Permanent. People in the office were already talking about it. No one likes a credit thief, and now Jake was the perfect cautionary tale. The guy had burned himself completely. And the best part? I didn't even have to do anything. I just let him destroy himself with his own arrogance. But the story wasn't over yet. Because what happened next? That's when things got really interesting. With Jake gone, things in the office felt lighter. People whispered about it for a few days, but soon it was business as usual. Or so I thought. A few days after the meeting, I got an unexpected email from the CEO's office. Subject, let's talk. I stared at the screen. My pulse picked up. Was this a good thing? A bad thing? Was I in trouble for how everything played out? I took a deep breath and made my way to the executive floor. When I stepped into the CEO's office, he didn't waste time with small talk. I'll be honest with you, he said, leaning back in his chair. You should have been the one presenting that project from the start. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I appreciate that. I don't like when people like Jake waste my time, he continued, and I definitely don't like when real talent gets overlooked. I was about to respond when he dropped the bombshell. I want you to take his place. I blinked. Take his place? Yes. He folded his hands. We were already considering a leadership position for that department, but Jake was on the list before he proved he wasn't fit for it. Now, you're at the top of that list. I sat there, letting the words sink in. Not only had Jake humiliated himself and lost everything, but his attempt to steal my work had directly led to me getting the job he probably wanted for himself. It was poetic justice, and I wasn't about to let this opportunity slip away. I accepted the offer, and just like that, I wasn't just another employee anymore. I was in charge. Accepting the promotion felt like closing the final chapter on Jake's pathetic attempt to steal my work. But what happened next? That was the real cherry on top. A few weeks after Jake's quiet resignation, I got a LinkedIn notification. Jake had applied to a company in our industry, and we shared a mutual connection. Curious, I did some digging. It turned out he was struggling to find a new job. Apparently, word had gotten around that he had left our company under suspicious circumstances. The corporate world is small, and people talk. No one wanted to take a risk on a guy who had been exposed as a fraud in front of top executives. But the real kicker? One afternoon, I got an email from a recruiter. Hey, my name. We're considering an applicant named Jake, last name for an open position. You worked with him. Would you be open to providing feedback on his performance? I grinned. Here it was, the moment I could truly decide Jake's fate. I thought about it for a second. I could have destroyed him completely, told the recruiter exactly what he had done, and ensured he never worked in the industry again. But honestly, he had already destroyed himself. So, I kept it professional. Jake was involved in several projects during his time here. However, I'd strongly recommend conducting a detailed reference check before making any hiring decisions. That was it. Just enough to plant the seed of doubt. A week later, I checked the company's job postings again. Jake's application had been removed. He didn't get the job. And me? I thrived in my new role. I built a team that actually respected real work. I pushed new projects forward, got recognition from leadership, and made a name for myself on my own terms. Jake tried to steal my success, but in the end, he gave it to me instead. Jake faded into obscurity after that. No LinkedIn updates, no new job postings, nothing. The last I heard, He had left the industry entirely. Apparently, after struggling to find a new role, he took some low-level consulting gigs just to stay afloat. But without a solid reputation, no major company wanted to touch him. Meanwhile, I was thriving. The leadership role opened doors I never expected. I got to sit in meetings with executives, pitch ideas directly to decision makers, and actually shape the future of the company. And the best part? I was finally recognized for my own work. No more being in the background, no more having my efforts dismissed or stolen. One day, I was leading a high-level strategy meeting when it hit me. This is where I was always supposed to be. Jake's sabotage attempt hadn't just failed. It had catapulted me forward. By trying to take what wasn't his, he handed me the biggest opportunity of my career. And he had no one to blame but himself. Looking back, I realized that Jake's betrayal was one of the best things that ever happened to me. At the time, it felt like a nightmare, watching someone else take credit for my work, feeling powerless while my boss brushed me off, thinking that maybe I'd never get the recognition I deserved. But in the end, the truth always comes out. Jake thought he could cheat his way to success, but success doesn't work that way. He got what he deserved, not because I sought revenge, but because his own arrogance and incompetence exposed him. Meanwhile, I kept my head down, did my job, and when the opportunity finally came, I took it. If you've ever been in a situation like this, where someone stole your ideas, undermined your hard work, or tried to push you into the background, just remember this. You don't have to play dirty to win. Your work speaks for itself. Let the truth reveal itself in time. The corporate world is small. If someone screws you over, trust that people will hear about it. Success is the best revenge. Instead of wasting time being bitter, use that energy to get ahead. And if you've ever dealt with a Jake in your own life, I want to hear about it. Drop your story in the comments. How did you handle it? What happened in the end? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more real-life stories of corporate drama, revenge, and karma. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.